David McKnight graduated from Brigham Young University with honors in 1997. He has been featured in Forbes, USA Today, The New York Times, Fox Business, Bloomberg Radio, MarketWatch, CBS Radio, CNBC, Yahoo Finance, NASDAQ.com, Reuters, Investors Business Daily, Kiplinger's, and numerous other national publications. David's best-selling book, The Power of Zero, has sold over 400,000 copies, and the updated and revised version was published by Penguin Random House in 2018. When it launched in September of 2018, it finished the week as the #2 most sold business book in the world. For 2 consecutive years, Forbes magazine has ranked The Power of Zero as a top 10 financial resource in the country. This book was recently made into a full-length documentary film called The Power of Zero. The Tax Train is Coming. When his most recent book, The Guru Gap, launched in December of 2024, it finished the week at number 8 on the USA Today bestseller list and was the top-selling business book in the world. He and his wife Felice have 7 children. Please give a warm welcome to David McKnight.
Go. Thanks for having me, guys.
I appreciate you being here, David. Really do. And I figured before you dive in, I'd love to ask you a few, quick targeted questions because I know, again, we're here to talk about your new book coming out, The Secret Order of Millionaires. And I want to just give you a couple quick questions to kind of lighten up the mood before we dive into the presentation. So first question I have is, in this book, you dedicated this really to millennials and Gen Z. So why did you feel it was important to kind of target younger investors, and what financial challenges did you think these generations faces versus, say, a prior type of generation?
Well, I have Gen Zs as children, so I can tell you from firsthand experience. I've had a front row to Gen Z for the last little while now, and I can tell you that we have to deal with these younger generations differently than we deal with older generations. They tend to have much shorter attention spans. They tend to be much more into instant gratification. They look for shortcuts to the top of the mountain. They tend to be less financially prepared than their baby boomer and Gen X forebears. They have less money saved by the same age. They have higher debt to income ratios. So they're just generally behind the wealth building curve. And so a lot of times they think that whatever worked for their parents or grandparents is not going to work for them. They're much more into things like Bitcoin and meme coins and NFTs, these types of things. And these do not have proven, time-tested track records of success. And so my fear is that they're abandoning the sort of the thing that brought them to the dance, these proven, time-tested principles. So I really wanted to dedicate a book to these younger generations so they can really get on course from a financial perspective and do the same types of things their parents and grandparents before them did to become financially independent.
I tell you, man, I'm definitely going to get this book because I've got a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old, and they're not going to get that type of language or information from college or high school for sure. So that's awesome. Now, I was going to say another question I would have is, you've written extensively about retirement planning and tax-free strategies, but this book takes a completely different approach. What prompted you to write more of a fictional story about principles of wealth building instead of just another traditional nonfiction business style book?
Well, it once again goes back to the readership that I'm targeting. It's these younger generations, and I'm telling you, if you put 2 books in front of a Gen Z, one is a cool short financial parable that's going to suck them in, and once they start it, they can't stop, or a boring business book. I think they're going to pick that short story every single time. And so the idea was that once they start it, they can't stop it, and as they sort of get absorbed through the story, they simultaneously absorb these 7 financial principles along the way. So really the goal is to say, hey, what packaging of these principles are they more likely to consume? And overwhelmingly, in my mind, the answer was, a little financial novella that they're actually interested in reading.
Awesome. Awesome. And I guess what I'd ask is just one more quick question, and then we'll let you dive in because I can't wait to hear about the book. So this book does read more like a financial thriller than really a traditional money book. If someone hasn't read it yet, how would you really describe the style? So, what kind of reading experience were you really trying to create with this?
Well, I had someone who read it the other day. They said, Dave, this is like a cross between the richest man in Babylon and the millionaire next door. So I thought that was a pretty apt description. Let me tell you what I was going for. I was going for how many of you guys have ever read the Da Vinci Code? Anybody ever read the Da Vinci Code? Okay, so the thing that I love about Dan Brown novels is that he has a compelling premise, but he has all sorts of historical facts and details. So by the time, for example, that you finish reading the Da Vinci Code, all of a sudden you're practically an expert on Leonardo da Vinci, right? And codes and ciphers. That's the type of thing that I was trying to get here, that they're absorbed into a really compelling premise. And along the way, they unwittingly absorb all these details. The other person I was trying to model this after, I don't know how many of you guys have read, or sorry, seen the movie The Sixth Sense by M. Night Shyamalan. That's when you look up on AI, what is the most famous twist ending of all time? That movie comes up. It's got the most famous twist ending of any movie ever. And so I love twist endings myself. So this story, I have to, for you to be able to see it, I got to put it right on my face. That's what I've learned. Okay. For you guys, I tell people, not only is it a compelling premise, it's got a twist ending that will. Uh-oh, so I got some feedback. Okay, it's got a twist ending.
Joe, I'm muting you.
Yeah, it's got a twist ending that will absolutely knock you out of your seat. I tell people when you get to near the end of the book, you got to surround your chair with cushions and pillows because the ending's going to blindside you. It's going to knock you out of your chair. So cool premise, cool plot, very absorbing. Once you pick it up, you can't put it down. And then there's this payoff at the end that's very, very gratifying. So that's basically the feedback I've gotten so far. Once people pick it up, they can't put it down, and then they did not see the ending coming. So lots of cool stuff for the younger generation, but I think it's going to be cool for anybody of any generation as they read it.
Love it. Love it. Well, I'll let you dive into your presentation. Thank you for, sharing some of those key items there. And, again, for anybody, just the housekeeping, let's keep it on mute. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And David, take it away.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the 7 principles that are embedded within the pages of the story. The first of which, and by the way, you don't have to agree with all of these, but I'm telling you that this is not stuff that I invented. All of this comes from proven time-tested sources. The principle number 1 that I start off in the book is that the stock market is the single greatest engine of wealth creation that the world has ever seen. Now, for people who come from an insurance background, we don't always believe this, but I believe it. I invest a lot of money in the stock market, but I also invest a lot of money in life insurance. And I'm going to show you by the end of today how all of it ties together. Life insurance on its own is not magical. Investing on its own is not magical. But when you use the two in concert, one with another, that's where the magic happens. First, we got to establish the premise. Why is stock market investing so important? Well, if you look at this chart on the right here, this blue line represents what the stock market has done over the last 200 years. It's basically this permanent upward trend. And Nick Murray, who's a very famous speaker in our industry, he said it best: the stock market is a permanent upward trend that's punctuated every 3 to 5 years by a down market, but it recovers and it just keeps surging ahead. That's the story of the stock market. And the great thing about the stock market is it allows you to participate in the growth of the most innovative, productive, dynamic companies all across the planet. You basically have CEOs that wake up every day and they say, how can I funnel profits to my shareholders? How can I make my shareholders obscenely wealthy? It's this amazing joint partnership enterprise, and it's got a track record. It's worked really well. It's got a track record of 10% over the last 80 years. Now, I think it's important to recognize that there's lots of different ways that you can become a millionaire. There's a lot of different ways to become financially independent. But you have to be, as you're deciding which path you're going to take in life, you have to take account of how much stress whatever path you choose is going to cause you. And that's why I'm such a big fan of this return on hassle spectrum over on the right here. Basically, on the y-axis, it's measuring rate of return, and on the x-axis, it's measuring the difficulty or hassle or the stress you're going to feel along the way. Now, Phil's nodding his head because he's a business owner. I'm also a business owner. I have 19 employees. I had a fire one last week. I'm always putting out fires. I've got to track expenses. I've got to track revenues. I got to make sure that all lines up. It's a stressful proposition. I think to some extent, everybody on the webinar is a business owner. But you have to recognize if this is the way you're going to become a millionaire, you're going to experience some stress along the way. Of course, on the left side of the spectrum, you have T-bills, very low stress, but very low return. And right there in that middle ground, you see stock market investing, relatively low hassle, relatively high rates of return, sort of a nice happy medium. Now, some of these younger generations are going to say things like, well, the stock market may have made my grandparents and parents wealthy, but it's old, it's stodgy, it's antiquated, it's going to take forever for me to become wealthy. Well, guess what? Show me some other alternative that's got a similar track record of proven time-tested returns. You're not going to get it from any of these newfangled, new age exotic investments. Crypto's not going to do it. NFTs, altcoins, none of these have the track record that are going to turn you into a millionaire and lead to your financial independence. Now, the number of people that have been investing in the stock market that have turned into millionaires is absolutely exploding. Fidelity came out with this report that said that between 2017 and 2024, the number of 401k millionaires increased fivefold, 500% in just 7 years. Nothing else is turning Americans into millionaires at quite the same pace. In fact, second place really isn't even all that close. Now, I don't love Dave Ramsey. I can't imagine a lot of people on this call love Dave Ramsey. He says a lot of boneheaded things. He says that 100% of cash value life insurance sucks 100% of the time. You should take 8% withdrawal rates from your retirement plan. Don't ever do a Roth conversion if you're within 5 years of retirement. I could go on and on and on. But he did do something that I really did appreciate. He did this national study of millionaires. And what he did is he interviewed 10,000 millionaires all across the country. And what he discovered was really, really interesting. Very few of them had advanced degrees, very few PhDs, very few MBAs. Most of them were just normal people like you and me. And 8 out of 10 of them became millionaires through stock market investing. Very few of them had any inheritance to speak of. So if I were to summarize principle number one, I'm going to say, hey, look, there's lots of different paths to becoming millionaires, but the stock market historically has created more millionaires than any other approach. It's averaged 10% over a long period of time. It's time-tested. It's principle-based. It allows you to participate in the growth of the most productive, innovative companies all across the planet. And it allows you to become a millionaire in a relatively low hassle stress, I'd say stress-free, but relatively low stress sort of way. Now, principle number two is related to stock market investing. It's time in the market, not time in the market. By the way, Phil, did you want to record this? I don't know if you're recording on your end.
Yes, it's recording. Thank you, though.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Introduction. Wealth is built through long-term exposure to the stock market. What do I mean by market timing? Well, market timing basically, what we're trying to do with the stock market is trying to buy low and sell high, okay? So when you're a market timer, you're basically saying, I think I can predict based on my own observation, my own judgment, when the market is low, when it's in a trough, and when it's about to peak. So I can get in at the right time, I get out at the right time. So the idea is that you can time the market and you can do better than sort of buy and hold investing. Is that true? Well, what we know about market timing is that you have to be right twice. That's why it's so difficult. You have to be right when you get in, and you have to be right when you get out. And if you don't time that just exactly right, it can really collapse your returns over time. A lot of you may have seen this chart right here. It basically says that if you had dropped $10,000 into the S&P 500 in 2003, took a nap for 20 years, woke up in 2022, that $10,000 would have been worth 64 and change, right? However, if you had fancied yourself a market timer, you said, look, I think I know better than the market. I think I know when to get in and when to get out. And you missed just the best 10 days over that time period. You no longer have 64 and change. You have about 29,700. And it just keeps getting worse from there to the point where if you miss the best 60 days, that would have been me. Not only did you not make money, you actually lost money. That 10,000 turned into 4,200. So if you miss just a couple of days, when you're a market timer, can really collapse your returns over time. Now, take a look at this chart on the right. This is what the stock market has done over the last 50 years. You notice that it doesn't go straight up. It's sort of an electrocardiogram. It's on a tilt, right? It's electrocardiogram. It goes up and down, but generally the trend is upward. Here's the problem. When you have lots of ups and downs, it makes you feel lots of different emotions. You feel greed, you feel euphoria, or you feel panic. And when the market takes a tumble, people feel panic, and that induces them to want to get out of the market and get into cash. The problem with that is when the biggest recoveries, the biggest returns in the stock market happen right after the biggest fall, right after the biggest, right after the worst days in the market. So what happens is people are on the sidelines and they don't participate in that growth. And that sort of characterizes the deficiencies of market timing. Most investors who try to time the market end up locking in their losses. So if timing the market is not a winning scenario, what is the winning scenario? Well, it turns out that time in the market is what wins the day. True wealth happens when you have steady exposure to stock market investing that's not punctuated by constantly getting in and getting out, but just staying invested over long periods of time. There are no shortcuts to the top of the mountain. Your brother-in-law on the golf course isn't going to give you that special secret stock tip that's going to make you wealthy. The slow, steady approach is the one that builds wealth over time. Now, this is a really important principle that I love to talk about. It's the market is already priced in. What does that really mean? That means that if Tesla is worth $200 a share, there's a reason it's worth $200 a share. And if you listen to Elon Musk on a podcast and he starts saying things like there's going to be an Optimus robot in every house across the country within 10 years, that can make you feel like, wow, there's an opportunity here. I think I should get in on Tesla. My buddy actually did this. He actually lost money for almost 3 straight years and was feeling stress and anxiety the entire time. The thing that you have to realize is that if Tesla is worth $200 a share, there's a reason it's worth $200 a share. It takes into account future sales, economic expectations, product launches. That's all baked into the current price of Tesla. Anybody claiming they can predict what any company can do, whether it's Tesla, Apple, whatever, they're claiming to have information the rest of the world doesn't have, or they're a member of Congress sitting on just the right committee, or they're an inside trader, which is illegal and will get you sent to jail. Now, this is a super famous quote that came out on Reddit a couple of years ago, and it's sort of generally understood to be the best quote as it relates to whether the market is efficiently priced. This guy says, don't even ask the question. The answer is yes, it's priced in. Think Amazon will beat the next earnings? That's already been priced in. You work at the drive-thru for Mickey D's and found out that the burgers are made of human meat? Priced in. You think insiders don't already know that? The market is an all-powerful, all-encompassing being that knows the very inner workings of your subconscious before you're even born. Your very existence was priced in decades ago when the market was valuing Standard Oil's expected future earnings based on population growth that would lead to your birth, what age you would get a car, how many times you would drive your car every week, how many times you take the bus, train, etc. Anything you can think of has already been priced in, even the things you aren't thinking of. You have no original thoughts. This gets sort of reductio ad absurdum. Your consciousness is just an illusion, a product of the omniscient market. Free will is a myth. The market sees all, knows all, and will be there from the beginning of time until the end of the universe. The market is already priced in the heat death of the universe. So please, before you make a post on WSB asking whether Apple has priced in AirPods 11 sales or whatever, know that it has already been priced in, and don't ask such a dumb question again. So let's apply this principle to Apple. If Apple is currently worth $274 a share, why is it worth $275 a share? Because all available information in the world says that that's what it's worth. It reflects all the cumulative judgment, all the cumulative information available to buyers and sellers across the planet. If new information were to emerge that suggests that Apple should be worth more, guess what? Buyers would buy more shares. They would drive the price up, and that would affect the price. So $274 is the market's best estimate right now of what Apple stock should be worth. And the moral of the story is there is no way to predict what any individual stock, whether it be Apple, Tesla, or any other company, is going to do next. Now, people say, gosh, Dave, I'd love to invest in the stock market, but it feels a bit like gambling. Well, I don't know how many of you guys have been to Las Vegas, but if you go to Las Vegas, old Las Vegas, and you see some of these older casinos, they actually have signs above the door that say, we have, for example, 97% slot machines. What does that mean? That means that if you walk into that establishment and start playing the slot machines and you stay in there long enough, eventually you will walk out with 97% of your money. In other words, the longer you gamble, the more likely you are to lose money. Well, as it turns out, stock market investing is just the opposite. The longer you stay in the market, the less likely you are to lose money. The likelihood of losing money after 1 month is 38%. After 1 year, it's 25%. You get to the point where if you're in between 10 and 30 years, it's virtually a risk-free proposition. You're not only not likely to lose money, you're more likely to become obscenely wealthy. Now, you may say, hey, look, I don't want to invest when Joe Biden is in power, or I don't want to invest when Donald Trump was in power. Well, guess what? The market is no respecter of political parties. In fact, if you were to drop $1,000 into the S&P 500 in 1953 and only invested when Republicans were in power, that $1,000 would be worth slightly more than $1,000 today. If you only invested when Democrats were in power, you would have slightly more. However, if you stayed invested the entire time, that $1,000 would be today worth almost 1.6 million. The stock market does not care who you favor personally from a political perspective. So in summary, predicting the short-term stock market move is a fool's errand. It's a losing proposition. If you don't get it perfectly accurately, you're going to collapse your returns. You need long-term exposure to stock market investing to reduce risk. Avoid trying to look for that shortcut to the top of the mountain, and you need to stay invested regardless of what happens on the geopolitical scene or regardless of what's happening in the stock market. Principle number 3 is, and we've touched on this already, don't invest in individual stocks. Instead, buy the entire market. Why would I say something like that? Well, when you invest in a single stock, just like my buddy, it's going to lead to lots of stress and anxiety. And you are claiming to know something the rest of the world doesn't have. Why are individual stocks so risky? Because it requires you to make a prediction about the direction of a given company. And again, the market has already priced in all known information. You're likely to feel lots of anxiety, lots of stress, and you're going to make bad decisions and even educated guesses, even hunches. I hear people tell me this all the time. I had a hunch the market would go up. I had a hunch the market would go down. Guess what? That is not likely to make you wealthy over long periods of time. Why would you want to invest in the entire market? It's going to allow you to participate in the growth of those innovative, dynamic companies all across the planet. It's going to remove the risk of investing in individual stocks. It's going to make the entire process much less emotional and stress-inducing, and it ensures that you're participating in the winners over time. Now, this is what we call a quilt chart. Maybe you've seen it before. And what it does is it breaks down the stock market into sectors, and it tells you which sectors did the best in any given year and which sectors did the worst in any given year. And you can see, for example, in 2014, real estate investment trusts did the best, energy did the worst. Well, if you're the type of person that says, I'm going to listen to Jim Cramer on cable TV, he's a stock market guy, and he tells you, he tries to predict which stocks are going to go up and which are going to go down. And if in 2016 he says, energy is the way to be, it's the sector to be in, so you put all your money in energy stocks. Well, guess what? The very next year, energy was the worst. Same with 2018, same with 2019. 2020 came in dead last. So this is what we should be doing and teaching our younger generations to do. It's what Jack Bogle said. He said, instead of looking for the needle in the haystack, you got to buy the entire haystack. And that's what that looks like. So the best way to own the entire market, the best way to buy the entire haystack is to invest in index funds, okay? And you don't need very many. You need one that allows you to invest in the total U.S. stock market index. Why so much money in the U.S.? Because it's the financial engine of global growth. And you want to put 30% in a total international market, stock market index fund. Why? Because there are some decades when international does outperform, like 2000 to 2009. And this is going to allow you to participate in 12,000 of the most dynamic companies all across the planet. Now, if you're old like me and Phil, you remember back in the 90s when mutual fund managers were all the rage. They could throw a dart at a dartboard. A monkey could throw a dart at a dartboard and pick a winning stock. It would go up 30% per year. Some of these mutual fund managers became very famous. They were like oracles. Their faces graced the covers of magazines because of how successful they were. Well, an interesting thing happened. You know, you've heard the phrase, when the tide goes out, you find out who's been swimming naked. It turns out that everybody was doing well in the 90s. And when the market came crashing back down in 2001, 2002, we sort of figured out that most of these, over time, most of these mutual fund managers couldn't even outpace a simple index fund. In fact, the more that time went along, the more that mutual fund managers realized they couldn't keep up unless they put index funds in their portfolios, to the point where today the average mutual fund manager has 70% of their portfolio invested in index funds. I love this little video that I found on social media. It analogizes this guy on a subway platform to the average mutual fund manager that invests all your money in index funds, charges you 1.5% for it, and then takes credit for it. So the guy in the yellow vest, it's like the mutual fund manager. He stops the subway as it comes into the station. He opens the door because it wouldn't have opened on its own, right? He ushers these people on board. He closes the door because it wouldn't have been able to close on its own, and then he pushes it out of the station. So I know Phil is laughing here because he understands exactly why this is the perfect analogy. You have mutual fund managers today that are charging you 1.5% to grow your money, and they're simply putting 70% of your money into index funds. So in summary, individual stocks are going to make your life miserable. You're going to worry all the time. You're going to have unnecessary volatility. If you invest in you don't have to worry about getting that secret special stock tip from your brother-in-law on the golf course. You just need a global index portfolio and time on your side. Now, principle number 4 is set it and forget it. What does that mean? That means that to be successful, you need a systematic, automated plan that's going to work regardless of whether you're tinkering with it or not. It's got to be out of mind, out of sight. Now, when I say automate your investing, this is what I mean. There's something called the save first, spend later principle. What that means is that as soon as your paycheck hits your account, you need to have your investment company automatically deduct the money from your check or from your account and invest it in an automated, systematic way into the stock market. Now, you may say, I don't want to do it in an automated way. Every month, I want to make the decision on whether I make an investment or not. Guess what? Sooner or later, you're going to have a month where things are tight. Maybe you have a big unexpected expense, and you're going to decide to not invest that month. Well, guess what? Once you fall off the wagon, it's pretty hard to get back on. When you automate your investing plan, it ensures consistency over long periods of time. And the younger you start, the easier it is. Let's talk about the high cost of procrastination. If you wanted to save $5 million by the time you're 65 and you think you can grow your money at 10% per year, here's how much you'd have to save per year if you were 25. $8,400 a year, about $700 a month. It'd probably be pretty tight, but you could probably do it. But if you wait until you're 35, you procrastinate, say, hey, look, I'm going to be better prepared to invest in 10 years. Now, all of a sudden, it's not $700 a month. It's almost $2,000 a month. And of course, if you wait till 45, it goes all the way up to $5,000 per month. So the longer you wait, the harder it is to save for retirement. Now, this is what I call the 40-year nap. If once you put your automated investment plan in place, I tell people to take a nap for 40 years. What does that mean? That means when your account statements arrive in the mail, if you've got a solid plan that you've set up from the beginning, you are not to look at your account statements. Why? Because account statements cause you to feel an emotion that will make you make a dumb investment decision. Remember, the name of the game is to buy low, sell high. All the data says that if you look at your account statements, you do just the opposite. You buy high and you sell low. My kids can't understand it. My account statements arrive in the mail. I don't even open them. I put them in a file and I shut the drawer. I don't even look at it. And I'm happy. Dave Ramsey actually said this. He said, I don't care what the market's doing. It's going to do a roller coaster. I don't need the money now. Why should I look at it? Now, once again, if you're old like me and Phil, you may remember back to the 90s, this guy named Ron Popeil. He owned a company called Ronco, and he sold rotisserie chicken ovens. And he became very, very famous because of his catchphrase, which was what? Set it and forget it, right? Take a listen.
This easy, folks.
So simple. Isn't it, you guys? Isn't it simple?
Is that nice? I'll put the lid on. This is kind of nice. There it goes. Excellent. Slide this over. Get this chicken over, and this chicken over, and I'll just walk over here. I'll put it in this new Pro model. I'll slide it back. If you followed all the instructional material, you just set it and forget it.
That easy. Once you have your automated systematic plan in place, if it's a solid plan, you don't have to constantly tinker with it, you now have a permission slip to walk away, take a nap for 40 years. You've basically said it and forget it. All right.
Here we go.
Now, why does ignoring your investments work? Well, if you buy the entire market, as I've suggested, and you automate your contributions, the only real threat is you. The only real threat is your own behavior. The best defense, stop looking at your cotton picking account statements. It's not going to do you any good. It's going to cause you to feel an emotion that will make you make a irrational decision vis-a-vis your investments. Long-term discipline is greater than short-term tinkering. Now, if you watched the Olympics a couple years ago in Paris, you may have come across this guy on the right. He was a Turkish pistol shooter that sort of took the entire Olympics by storm. He endeared himself immediately to just about everyone across the planet because he would show up at his competition. He had one simple gun. He had this rather nondescript jersey, and he had basically prescription eyeglasses. That's all he had. He'd pick up his gun, he'd aim it, he sort of squint like this, and then he would win the silver medal. So he won the silver medal. He didn't have any fancy accoutrements, nothing like that. The reason why he endeared himself to the entire world is because they contrasted what he looked like with everybody else in the competition. They had visors, they had scopes, they had headbands, armbands, holsters, special vests. I think that this is a perfect analogy to the two types of investors that we see today. The guy on the right has been dollar cost averaging to the S&P 500 for 12 years. He has no idea what's happening in the market because he doesn't care and he hasn't checked his portfolio in over a decade. Versus the guy on the left who's got different stock forums. He makes 40 to 50 trades a day and he can't figure out why he's down 60%. You want to be the guy on the right, not the guy on the left. All right, you may have heard the story about Sam Spender and Susie Saver. They were friends in high school, but they both graduated, and Susie began investing immediately. She invested $2,000 per year for 12 years. Then she had sort of a life emergency, stopped investing, but she left everything in the stock market. It earned 10%. By the time she reached 65, she had almost $1 million. Now, Sam Spender graduated, and he was sort of the party animal. He liked to go to the clubs. He liked to drive the fast cars. He lived beyond his means. Well, by the time he hit 34, he realized that he was falling way behind the curve. He was falling behind Susie. So he decided to play catch up. He invests $2,000 per year every year for 30 years. He invests 3 times the amount that Susie invested. But by the time he reached retirement, he got the same rate of return, but he had half the amount. He had $442,000 compared to $993,000. What's the moral of the story here? Right now, today is always the best time to start saving for retirement. So in summary, automate your investment plan. It's got to be out of mind, out of sight. Time plus money is the formula that leads to success. If you wait to right before you're about to retire, saving money is not going to help you. Procrastination means you're going to have to save even more down the road. Don't look at your account statements. Take emotion out of the investment plan, and that gives you permission to walk away from your plan and take a nap for 40 years. Now, principle number 5 is right up my own alley. I've written an entire book about getting to the 0% tax bracket in retirement. It's called The Power of Zero. Why would anybody in their right mind want to be in the 0% tax bracket in retirement? Well, just so happens the U.S. is on an absolutely apocalyptic debt trajectory. We have massive unfunded obligations for entitlement programs. And people are starting to read the handwriting on the wall. They recognize that tax rates in the future are likely to be much higher than they are today. And they want to protect themselves by taking advantage of every nook and cranny, every tax-free nook and cranny in the IRS tax code. Now, take a look at this chart on the left. You can see that the debt to GDP has gone up and down, but it's projected to just go straight up. We're talking $2 trillion of additional debt per year over the next 10 years, $3 trillion per year after that. We've got $200 trillion in unfunded obligations for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. The Social Security Trust Fund goes bust in 2034. Medicare goes bust shortly after that. At least the trust fund does. So the federal government's going to need huge infusions of cash by 2035. They're going to start phasing in tax increases in 2035. And according to, now this is David Walker. I think he's an American hero. He's a former comptroller general of the U.S. government, basically the CPA of the USA. He wrote a book about this back in 2010. He could see the handwriting on the wall. He was projecting out. He says, look, the math ain't mathin'. So he says, he appears on NPR to talk about this new book that he wrote called Come Back America. And he told the radio show hostess, he said, hey, look, tax rates have to double or we're going to go broke as a nation. And she didn't believe him. So he says, look, I can give you a 4-letter word that explains why tax rates have to double. She couldn't figure out what it was. So they opened up the phone lines and people started to call in, and nobody could figure out what that one 4-letter word was to explain why tax rates have to double. They heard debt, they heard kids, they heard jobs, they heard wars, they heard fear. One guy even said health. They said, no, that's not a 4-letter word. What is the 4-letter word that explains why tax rates have to double? It's math. What did David Walker mean by math? Well, basically what he's saying is saying, look, if this is what you're spending and this is what's coming in, you either have to double what's coming in, cut in half what's going, or some combination of the two. And Ward recently came out with a study in 2023 that said if we don't right our fiscal ship of state by 2043, that no combination of raising taxes or reducing spending will prevent the financial collapse of our nation. So how do you shield your clients and prospects from the impact of rising taxes? You got to get to the 0% tax bracket. And you do so by taking advantage of every tax-free nook and cranny in the IRS tax code. We're talking Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, Roth conversions, distributions from IRAs and 401ks up to standard deductions, properly structured cash value life insurance, and if you can keep your provisional income low enough, tax-free Social Security. The goal should be to get to the 0% tax bracket in retirement. So in summary, taxes in the future are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today. We're already past, mathematically speaking, we're past the point of no return. The best way to shield yourself from the impact of higher taxes is to get to the 0% tax bracket. Why? Because if tax rates double, like more and more experts are now predicting, 2 times 0 is still 0. Principle number 6, this is where we talk about how cash value life insurance fits into the equation. And I'm borrowing a lot from a recent study by Ernst & Young. They came out with, I think, a year ago. And basically says they're suggesting that investing alone is not going to maximize your income in retirement. Life insurance alone will not maximize your income in retirement. But when you combine the two together, it's like the chocolate and peanut butter. That's where the magic happens. Why do I say that? Well, let's talk about this concept of what we call a volatility shield. One of the greatest risks that you can face in retirement is what we call sequence of returns risk. And that's what happens when you take money out of the stock market after a down year in your portfolio. If you can set up a separate account that allows you to pay for your living expenses in the year following a down year in the market, instead of having to live exclusively out of your stock portfolio, it can actually double the sustainable withdrawal rate on your stock portfolio. And that has huge implications. One of the biggest, which is it frees you up from the 4% rule. Now let's talk about the 4% rule real quick. I'm sure we've all heard of the 4% rule. It was invented by a guy named Bill Bengen, who was an MIT trained financial advisor. And in the early 90s, he noticed something that really disturbed him. His clients had like, say, $1 million in their IRA. When he asked them the question, how much money do you think you can take out of your $1 million portfolio every year and have a realistic likelihood that that $1 million is going to last a full 30-year retirement? You know what they did? They'd sort of go like this. They'd say, well, whatever the stock market did in the past, that's what I think I can take out in the future. So for example, if they thought the stock market did 8% historically, they said, well, I can take 8% out indefinitely from my portfolio, which of course does not account for sequence of returns risk. So this really disturbed him. So he began to crunch the numbers. And he did hundreds of thousands of computer simulations. And what he concluded was that 8% withdrawal rates had catastrophic failure rates, like 90% of the time. Even 5% withdrawal rates had failure rates of over 50%. So he settled on this 4% withdrawal rate. What does that mean? That means if you have $1 million day one of retirement, you can withdraw $40,000 that first year and then $40,000 plus inflation that second year, so on and so forth for the rest of your retirement. Why is the rule so conservative? Because it presupposes that you can take out 4% rain or shine. Whether the market is up or down, you can take out that 4%. Here's the key implication. If you could find a way to not have to take money out of your portfolio when it's down, you could actually have a much higher sustainable withdrawal rate. So the conclusion that that people have come to, retirement experts these days, is that the 4% rule is a very expensive way to fund your retirement. And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Let's say you decide that you need $100,000 in retirement above and beyond what Social Security and pension provide, and you have to live by the 4% rule. How much money will you need to save by day one of retirement? Well, simply divide 4% into 100,000. You'll need to save $2.5 million. Now, if I doubt that many of our clients or prospects are on track to hit that number, And if they have a shortfall, guess what? I got some pretty unsavory alternatives they can resort to. They can save more, spend less, work longer, die sooner, or take more risk in the stock market. I don't think these are great conversation starters with our clients and prospects. So how does the volatility shield enter into the equation? How does cash value life insurance help solve this problem? The idea here is that you accumulate 3 to 5 years worth of living expenses in a separate account that is not exposed to stock market volatility. And you draw from that account in the year following a down year in your stock portfolio. And what that does is it gives your portfolio a chance to recover before you take further distributions. The idea is that you need to save between 3 to 5 years worth of living expenses in that cash value life insurance by day one of retirement. And what the net effect on your distribution plan in retirement is that it increases your sustainable withdrawal rate from 4% to as high as 8% with a 93% success rate. So here's an interesting chart. I've crunched these numbers. I've built calculators that have crunched these numbers. If you have an 8% withdrawal rate, you got $1 million, you're taking out $80,000 per year. Okay, you're adjusted every year for inflation. What's the likelihood that that strategy is going to work over a 30-year retirement? Well, if you have 3 years of living expenses saved in your cash value life insurance, you have an 86% likelihood that strategy will work. Go over to the far right of the x-axis, 5 years worth of living expenses accumulated in your cash value life insurance, you now have a 93% likelihood that 8% strategy will work. Now, I got to warn you, Susie Orman also believes in this volatility shield type approach. She says you should have 3 to 5 years worth of living expenses accumulated. Accumulated where? She says in a savings account. Well, guess what? That's a catastrophic recommendation. Now, let's evaluate quickly what attributes a volatility shield should have, and then let's compare that against Susie Orman's recommendation. First of all, it's got to be safe. It can't protect yourself from volatility with an account that's exposed to volatility. So far, Susie Orman's recommendation of savings account works out okay, but this is where things cartwheel off the rails. It's got to be tax-free, free from federal tax, state tax, and capital gains tax. Why? Because if you got to pay tax every step along the way, you're going to have to save even more to compensate. And that takes money away from your stock market investing. It's got to be not only safe, but it's got to be productive. I'm talking growing between 5 and 7% net of fees per year. So it's got to be safe and productive. That's got to be in place by day one of retirement. So I think that Susie Orman's savings account recommendation fails on 2 of those 4 requirements. What is the financial tool that I think best qualifies? I think it's Index Universal Life. And let me tell you why. And by the way, Ernst & Young agrees with me. It has historical rates of return of between 5 and 7% net of fees. It guarantees you against stock market loss. And by way of that 0% wash loan, you can take distributions that are 100% tax-free and cost-free. Now, let me give you a real-world application. Let's say we got John and Mary, a couple. They're both age 30, and they're putting $7,000 into their Roth IRAs per year. And they think they can grow 10% per year, which means that by the time they retire at 65, they're going to have almost $3.8 million. And if they have to live by the 4% rule, that means they can take out $151,000 per year. However, if we were to do, as the Ernst & Young study says, and incorporate cash value life insurance in the form of IUL into the equation, watch what happens. The Ernst & Young study recommends reallocating 30% of their investment contributions to IUL. So that means they're investing $4,200 in the IUL, $9,800 into the Roth. And that money in the Roth grows at 10%. Notice that they're now going to have a smaller balance in their Roth IRA by the time they reach retirement. Instead of 3.8, now it's only 2.6. And in the meantime, they're putting that $4,200 per year into their IUL, grows at 6%. Means they got a $468,000 balance by age 65. If they pay for their living expenses out of their IUL in the year following a down year in the stock market, watch what happens. Instead of being constrained by the 4% rule, they can now take 8% out of that Roth IRA balance. 8% of a smaller balance is greater than 4% of a larger balance. So they can now take out $212,000 per year. That's 40% better because they incorporated IUL into the equation. So this is the moral of the story, folks. Investing alone there's nothing magic about it. IUL alone, nothing magic about it. But when you put the 2 together, that's when the real magic happens. So in summary, the volatility shield in the form of IUL protects you from sequence of returns risk. It allows your portfolio to recover before you take further distributions. It'll increase your sustainable withdrawal rate from 4 to 8%. It gives you more income in retirement, and Index Universal Life is, I believe, the best, most effective volatility shield. We're getting close to the end here. Principle number 7 is something that applies to everybody on this webinar. Our clients and prospects need to work with a good financial advisor. The average do-it-yourself investor is going to eventually succumb to their emotions, fear, greed, panic. They're going to make dumb financial decisions. If they don't have someone there to hold their hand, hold their feet to the fire, eventually they fall off the wagon and they start making emotion-driven investment decisions. So what does a good financial advisor do? Well, I'm convinced that most do-it-yourself investors know what they should do, but they rarely do it. Why? Because when the market gets volatile, they feel an emotion that causes them to make a bad choice. A good financial advisor helps reinforce their long-term objectives, prevents them from making panic-induced decisions, helps them maintain discipline along the way. Now, a lot of times you'll see these financial gurus that say, never pay a fee to a financial advisor, never buy a product that gives your financial advisor a commission. Now, that's interesting. They should say that because the average do-it-yourself investor, when making emotion-driven investment decisions, loses 3% per year. That means they lag the index fund by 3% per year. Well, if you're a good financial advisor and you're charging a fee of 1% or maybe you're making a commission that adds up to 1% over time, guess what? I've never been real good at math, but if I can charge you 1% and prevent you from making a 3% loss, don't you come out 2% ahead? Now, this has been completely vindicated by study after study, the most recent of which says that if a client works with a good financial advisor, they're going to see a 2.39% to 2.78% annual return premium over those do-it-yourself investors who don't have an advisor, and that's net of fees. So why does this work? Because a good advisor is going to help you with every facet of your financial plan. Dalbar is a company that studies investor behavior. That's all they do. They study investor behavior year over year over year, and they come out with these different interesting studies. They say that for this 1997 period of time, the average investor, because they made emotion-driven investment decisions, only averaged 2.3%, whereas the average client that worked with a good financial advisor was simply ignoring their account statements over that period of time, average 7.7. That's 5% better off per year because they had a good financial advisor. Now, I think that having a good financial advisor is the crown jewel of the entire framework. Why? Because if you are a good financial advisor, what are you going to be teaching your client? You're going to be teaching them about the importance of stock market investing, that they should have time in the market, not timing the market, that they should buy the entire market, not speculate with single stocks, that they should have an automated plan that once in place, they should set it and forget it. The importance of getting to the 0% tax bracket in retirement and incorporating cash value life insurance. Principles number 1 through 6 are more easily accomplished with the help of a good financial advisor. So in summary, the average investor without help along the way is unlikely to become a millionaire. The average investor with a good financial advisor holding their hand every step of the way is likely to become a millionaire. Good financial advisors can more than justify the fee that they charge or the commission that they make. Why? Because they help their clients stay the course, execute on the plan, coordinate the funding and structure of the IUL, et cetera. Now, we're basically done here, but I know that financial advisors will typically ask this question at the following of this presentation. They'll say, Dave, this is really important stuff. How am I supposed to bottle this up and unleash it on my clients? And I say, well, there's a couple of different approaches you can take. I can send you the transcript for this presentation. It's only like 52 pages long, single space typewritten, and you can memorize it and then go to your client's living room and unleash this message. I said, there may be a better way. I've written a book called The Secret Order of Millionaires. And each one of these principles is embedded within the story of this book. And here's what I recommend. You simply buy copies of the book. You send them off to your clients. They could be old, they could be young. I think the message is actually going to resonate with everybody. And send a little handwritten note that says, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, or Tom and Mary, the other day I was reading this book. As I was reading this book, I couldn't stop thinking of you. Do me a favor. Read the book. I'll call back in a week. Let me know what you think. I actually had a PNC agent out of Las Vegas named Jeff Venuto. He took my invitation seriously. He sent books out to his clients, little handwritten notes that said, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, the other day I was reading this book. As I was reading, I couldn't stop thinking about you. Do me a favor. read the book. I'll call back in a week. Let me know what you think. The first full year he did that. He never done more than $40,000 of premium. First full year he did it. He did $363,000 of premium, ended up number one in all of Farmers. Okay. He did it second year in a row, finished at 365,000, finished number one in Farmers. Now I had a State Farm guy out of Colorado. He goes, Dave, I bought 40 year books. I didn't sell a single policy. I said, well, did you follow up with them? He goes, I didn't know that I had to. So folks, if you buy my books, keep following up, keep following up, keep following up. Follow up is what makes the world go round. Keep following up. And when they read the book, it will dramatically increase the likelihood that they become a client. It will set the table for a conversation on tax-free retirement. Now, for those of you who would like to get copies, even multiple copies, I would welcome that. You'll never get them less expensive than you will here today. Between now and midnight, you can get them at $5 off. This is actually $6 cheaper than you buy them on Amazon. I am paying for that $5 difference. It's coming right out of my own pocket. Why am I doing that? Okay. I'm doing that because I want this to become a New York Times bestseller, not because it's an ego thing, but because I think it's going to be much easier for you to give this book to a client if it says New York Times a bestseller at the top. I think it's much easier to take these concepts mainstream if we can get that sort of stamp of approval from New York Times. Now, to be fair, last year I did a book called The Guru Gap, and I sold about 10,000 copies the first week. And it did not become a New York Times bestseller. Why? Because I chose to have the book published the week of Christmas when all of the other cookbooks were coming out at the same time. Snoop Dogg was in my category. He came out with a cookbook. Dolly Parton also came out with a cookbook, both of which made the list and mine didn't. So this time around, the book's coming out May 5th. So guess who I'm not going to have to compete against to be on the New York Times bestseller list? Snoop Dogg and Dolly Parton. So I would be absolutely honored if you guys help me in this goal, this mission to get this book on the New York Times bestseller list. You have to use this QR code on the right. It will lead you to a landing page. And on that landing page, you can go through checkout. At checkout, you must use the code SECRET. All uppercase, all one word, SECRET. That's going to give you that $5 off copy. If you buy one copy, you'll save $5. You buy 10 copies, you'll save $50. You buy 100 copies, you'll save $500. I will tell you this. My daughter read this book. She's a Gen Z. And I said, what were your takeaways? She says, my takeaway is, it sounds like I need some index funds and sounds like I need an index universal life policy. So I promise you that when your clients and prospects read this book, it is going to lead to a conversation about tax-free retirement and will likely lead to a discussion on cash value life insurance. So that is the offer, folks. I'd be absolutely honored if you bought some copies and helped catapult this thing to a New York Times bestseller. If it becomes a New York Times bestseller, it'll be because of your help. And so I'd be absolutely honored to get your help in this goal. So, Phil, that's all I have. I'm going to leave this up here in case people want to take a picture of the QR code or scan it with their phone. I'll lead it back to you if anybody has any questions or comments or observations about anything we've talked about today. I still got some time until the top of the hour, and so I'm happy to field any questions.
Well, we'll tell you, I already just put an order in myself, so I really appreciate the opportunity for you to come on today. One thing that I would say, a takeaway that I really liked hearing, and I'm going to steal it. I'm just going to say it right now. The best way to invest is in the entire haystack versus just trying to find that one needle in the haystack. That's just so amazing. And, it's really good to hear you talk about it, because so many people in our industry that maybe only have a life license want to throw everything into an IUL because that's all they can sell. But when they realize that when they talk about a holistic plan, maybe even strategically partner up with someone who has, qualified licenses, you actually open up a better opportunity for discussion and conversation. So it's always about holistic planning, and I really appreciate you saying that.
That's a great point. Great point, Phil. I tell people this all the time. If all you ever talk about is life insurance, you look like a life insurance salesman, and nobody hands their life savings over to a life insurance salesman. The more you talk about Roth IRAs, the more life insurance you sell. I had a guy that came up to me. He goes, Dave, I never did more than $30,000 of insurance. I said, why is that? He goes, because I would always beat up on the stock market. I was always trying to exalt the IUL and do so by denigrating all the other alternatives. He goes, I started to adopt your approach where I said, hey, it's just one of multiple streams of tax-free income you should have in retirement. I started doing the balanced comprehensive approach. He goes, the first full year I did that, he goes, I did $300,000 of premium. I said, why do you think that is? He says, because people no longer looked at me as a life insurance salesman. They looked at me as a balanced comprehensive tax-free retirement planning specialist.
Yep. Yep. And that's really what it is. I think one of the things that I come across a lot, and I know some people on this call do too, is there are people who will, poo-poo on the IUL because it's not giving quote unquote double digit returns. And then everyone becomes a day trader. They focus on options and things like that. So, what would you say if someone came up to you and saying, well, I just do options because, I'm going to make way more money?
I'd say, show me the proven track record that that's actually the case. I can show you a proven track record that shows that day traders actually lose their shirts about 90% of the time. Very, very few people are successful at day trading. That's not my opinion. That's just a fact. All the data bears that out. You can do it. You may have a 1 in 20 chance of hitting that home run. But guess what? Is that the type of strategy that's going to give you peace of mind and it'll make your pillow soft at night? No. It's I have lots of different sources of stress in my life, but my stock market investing is not one of them. Why? Because I'm in the middle of a 40-year nap. I don't care what the stock market's doing. My plan is in place. It's automated and I ignore it. I don't care. I walked away from it.
Love it. Love it. Dina had an interesting question. So, from your opinion, do you find that in this conversation with, IULs, so obviously as well annuities become a conversation piece? I think I kind of know the answer, but, from a flexibility standpoint, rate of return, would you put the IUL above annuities from a retirement standpoint? How would you kind of correlate that conversation?
Well, I mean, it depends on the age. If somebody is super young, I'm probably not going to recommend an annuity. I'm going to recommend an IUL, number one, because it's tax-free. Annuities, sort of by definition, are tax-deferred. So you just have, I think, a little bit more flexibility with the IUL. You can continue to contribute to it. It's going to grow in a tax-free way. You can take tax-free distributions. Now, there are some annuities that have what we call a piecemeal internal Roth conversion feature that allows you to convert the money from tax-deferred to tax-free an amount of your choosing over a time frame that your financial plan calls for. So you could do it, but I think you're going to get better growth from the IUL, and I think more flexibility. Plus, you get the death benefit that doubles as long-term care, and I think that's something that everybody needs.
Yeah, so very situational, which it's always, every time I tell people, I'm like, doing this for 20 years, I've not had one client who's ever been the same. So, having the additional arrows in your quiver, conversations about asking the right questions. So, yeah, I agree with that. Um, Prajesh asked a question here. Will this also be available like an ebook or is it mostly hard copy?
No, it's it's published through a major publisher, so they're taking care of the ebook. They're taking care of the of Audible. Unfortunately, neither of those two help towards the New York Times bestseller status. So if you're looking to
Wink,
hand
wink.
this out to a client or prospect, the hard copy tends to work better. So if you plan on getting some copies between now and May 5th, I'd appreciate it if you did it by way of the hardcover. And then once it comes out, you can feel free to buy the Audible or the Kindle. And Dina says annuity probably better for most people that are close to or in retirement. Yeah. I mean, remember, you've got to have 3 to 5 years worth of living expenses built up inside the Volatility Shield account by day one of retirement. And if you're 5 years away from retirement, it's going to be pretty tough to get that amount of money into your IUL. You're going to need a huge death benefit. You're going to need huge contributions. You can put that all in at once into an annuity if you're 5 years from retirement, no problem. So Dina's absolutely right in that regard. The closer you are to retirement, the more likely the annuity is going to be the answer versus IUL.
Yep. Well, we hit the top of the hour. We actually went into overtime by a minute. So what I would say is, David, truly, truly thank you for the opportunity to come on today and share your value. I'd love to hear your insights. I'm very appreciative of everything that you brought today. So, guys, make sure if you haven't yet, I'll give you a couple last seconds here as I draw us to a close to scan that QR code. Very quick, very easy. For those who didn't get to see the whole thing, fell asleep in the middle, which I highly doubt. They usually do that when I'm talking, but I'll be putting it up on the YouTube channel for anybody to watch the recap. And once again, David, thank you so much for the opportunity to come on today, and we look forward to reading the book.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you. Thanks so much.
All right, see you guys.